Yeah. It's a nice time of year, isn't it? Should be back in New York for the Easter parade, but,
Right.
Now, let me say something. Besides, that's right.
Johnny Carson made tonight's show look effortless, from the way he handled guests, as if they were old friends, to the laughter and charm. Unfortunately, a few other guests rubbed him the wrong way, and the stories behind what happened are quite surprising, a little messy, and one or two are particularly noteworthy. They were quite personal. So, let's start with the one that changed everything. Joan Rivers.
Sure. But Johnny knew the best straight man in the world.
Joan Rivers had been working in the comedy scene for years. She was a good writer. She hustled and clawed her way up in a world that rarely opened doors for women. But even she would have told you that everything changed the night she sat across from Johnny Carson in 1965. She had landed a spot on The Tonight Show, and it was Carson who looked at her and said, "You're going to be a star." That moment took her farther than she ever expected. At the time, The Tonight Show was a launching pad for aspiring writers and individuals seeking a career in show business. You were on your way to becoming the most popular if you were on Johnny Carson's good side, but if you weren't, then you figure out the rest of your life. At the time, Joan was known more for her writing than for her stage presence. She had been through it all. Nights spent sleeping in her car, short-term jobs, even a ban from the Jack Paar show after a single appearance. So when Carson gave her that kind of praise on a stage that millions tuned into every night, it wasn't just a compliment, it was a green light from the gatekeeper of late-night television. That first appearance became the start of a career-defining relationship. The club gigs started pouring in, but more than that, Joan and Johnny were becoming a powerhouse team on camera. She joined the writing staff, and by the 1980s, she wasn't just a guest, she was the go-to guest host. Whenever Carson was off, Joan was the one stepping in. He even introduced her to Edgar Rosenberg, the man she eventually married. By 1968, when she landed her daytime talk show, Johnny didn't just wish her well. He sat down as her very first guest. Their bond, at least professionally, looked unbreakable. She was loyal, always turning down bigger offers out of respect for Carson. But behind the scenes, cracks had already begun to form. By the mid-80s, there were certain rumors about Carson's retirement. He had been hosting The Tonight Show for over 2 decades, and speculation about who would succeed him was in the air. Joan had filled in for him more times than anyone could count, so it was only natural for her to assume her name would be on the short list. However, when she got her hands on a list of 10 potential successors, her name wasn't on it. At the same time, NBC was dragging its feet on renewing her contract, and Joan couldn't ignore the reality that she wasn't being paid what she was worth. And worse, she wasn't being seen for what she would become. That was when Fox stepped in with an offer that was too big to ignore. They were offering her a chance to host her late-night show, The Late Show starring Joan Rivers. Now, this wasn't just a spot on the line of potential hosts. It was going to be history, because she would be the first woman ever to host her show in that space. And even better, the network threw in a 5-year guaranteed deal, $15 million, and a producer role for her husband. This was the kind of deal people wait for their whole lives. Yet, she still has doubts about accepting the offer. At the time, her husband warned her that if she told Carson too early, she was risking being blocked before anything was even signed. Here's why. Johnny had a reputation for freezing out comedians who strayed too close to competition. And if the deal fell through, Joan could be stuck in limbo with no gigs, no show, and no way back. So she waited until everything was locked down, and then she made the call. "Johnny, it's Joan. I think I'm leaving the show. I have my show on Fox." That's what she said. But he hung up. She called again, and he hung up again. But when Carson was asked about it later, he denied that the call even happened. He said he found out from a press release. Adding to that, one of The Tonight Show's producers told the LA Times that he had no clue, as she had even been on the show just a week before her series was announced and hadn't said a word about it. "It came as a real surprise," he said, "an unusual way to do business, to say the least." In 2012, Joan was still on the issue. Following an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, she stated that Carson had lied. She also swore she made the call and she never got the chance to make things right. "I would see him in a restaurant," she said, "and go over and say hello. He wouldn't talk to me. So why was he so angry?" Joan believed it was a mix of things, the most obvious being that her new show aired at the same time as his. And to Carson, that made her not just disloyal, but a rival as well. She also thought it was related to her gender. "I think he really felt that because I was a woman, I was just his," she once said, "that I wouldn't leave him. I know this sounds very warped, but I don't understand what was going on." Her show eventually launched in 1986, but from the start, it felt like she was swimming upstream. Her husband, who was now her producer, clashed with Fox executives almost immediately. Celebrities and big-name guests refused to come on her show. It wasn't because of Joan. They were afraid of upsetting Johnny Carson. At the time, some stations wouldn't even air the show, all because they were in solidarity with Carson. Unfortunately, just 7 months in, Fox told Joan to fire her husband, but she wouldn't. So they fired them both. Not long after, her marriage started to unravel, and 3 months later, Edgar Rosenberg took his own life. It could have ended her right there. But Joan Rivers didn't go down like that. She came back in 1989 and launched The Joan Rivers Show, and piece by piece, she rebuilt. However, Carson never mentioned her publicly again, not even during his final Tonight Show episodes. She watched those last broadcasts, heartbroken, and in a rare moment on her show, nearly in tears, she released the weight of what she had been carrying all those years. "It gave me everything, that show. But not being invited, it was like I never existed, and it hurts me so much. He doesn't like me, too bad. I do like him." Johnny and Joan Rivera never spoke again. And when Johnny Carson passed away in 2005, the chapter closed for good. Bob Hope.
We're all straight, and Olivier's right across from me, and he went.
If you were watching The Tonight Show in the 70s or the 80s, it probably looked like Bob Hope was Johnny Carson's favorite guest because no one showed up more often. Every time, the band would kick into "Thanks for the Memory," and out Hope would come, sometimes unannounced or pretending it was a surprise, although everyone in the studio knew better. He would go on to crack a few polished jokes, toss in some banter that felt just a little too rehearsed, and then launch into a clip from his latest NBC special. That was the routine back then. Later on, he would vanish. But while the audience might have smiled at these gimmicks, Carson was on the table, gritting his teeth inwardly. Now, this wasn't a rivalry in the traditional Hollywood sense. The paparazzi weren't involved, and there was no press news. It was something that happened just behind the scenes. Think of it like this. Every family has that one older relative. This older relative has been around forever. Somehow, you have earned their respect, and now they expect a seat at the table, no matter how awkward it gets. So when they crack jokes or tell their tales, you nod along and laugh because it's polite to do so. Well, that was Bob Hope for Johnny Carson. Bob Hope wasn't just a TV star, he was also a star at NBC. Long before Johnny arrived, Hope ruled radio with The Pepsodent Show, the #1 program from 1942 to 1944. Then came television, and with it, an astonishing 272 NBC specials, and you bet, his run was nothing short of historic. Even by the mid-1980s, when his spotlight had dimmed, he was still dishing out 25 specials in 5 years. By 1993, at age 90, he had slowed down considerably, but he was able to complete a few more specials until he passed away at age 100 in 2003. Safe to say, because he had been NBC's golden child for so long, the network gave him a blank check when it came to The Tonight Show. Hope could appear anytime he wanted, and Carson? He couldn't say no. We'd get a request, producer Peter LaSalle recalled, and Johnny would go, "Again?" But then he'd just sigh and say, "No, you can't turn down Bob Hope." So Bob Hope kept showing up. This wasn't because he and Johnny were close, and certainly not because their comedy styles clicked. No one at NBC wanted to tell a legend to sit this one out. However, the truth is that Carson doesn't like Hope's act. He respected the legacy, sure. He knew Hope had earned his place in the business, But as a guest, he found him stiff, outdated, and frustrating. Hope showed up with everything pre-written, every joke, every answer, even his setups. Carson, on the other hand, thrived on spontaneity. He liked to explore and discover something fundamental in the moment. Johnny was very quick on his feet, said Andrew Nichols, Carson's former co-head writer. Very well read. He learned Swahili, Russian, and astronomy, and he appreciated guests who were curious about the world. But with Bob, there was nothing to talk about. Worse still, Hope's highlight reels, which were meant to promote his specials, were often way too long and clumsily edited. The Tonight Show team would ask for 2 minutes. Hope would bring 5. Worse still, the clips he brought on were not polished either. One producer even described them as being cut with a rusty knife. And then there were the later years, when Hope's hearing and eyesight began to fade. As a result, interviewing him became a minefield, leaving Johnny with the only option other than following his cue cards to the bone. If he asked the wrong question, Hope would answer something completely unrelated. There was even a moment after a powerful Carson monologue when Hope leaned over during a commercial break and asked if he could borrow some of the laughter for his special. Johnny, caught off guard, said, "Sure." But later, while he was watching the special at home, he swore he could hear Ed McMahon's laugh behind one of Hope's punchlines. Moments like that wore Carson down, because somehow it was extremely exhausting for him. Nichols once recalled Johnny saying, "If I ever end up like that, I want you to shoot me." Still, when NBC planned a huge 90th birthday special for Hope in 1933, Carson came back. It was the only time he ever delivered a monologue after his retirement. However, he did that on the condition that Hope would do one too. Underneath it all, he still had genuine respect for Bob Hope. Howie Mandel. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, a spontaneous act, or an idea that doesn't sit well with people, and suddenly you're not invited back. In the world of late-night television, where timing is everything, and the host's mood can make or break your career, a single appearance can single-handedly change the way things are. Howie Mandel learned that lesson the hard way. Now, Howie wasn't some new comic trying to break in. He was already a well-liked face on The Tonight Show, someone who had worked his way up with a steady stream of appearances. He had made it onto Johnny Carson's guest list 21 times, which is no small feat. He was funny and unpredictable in just the right way, and Carson seemed to enjoy having him around. But appearance number 22? That one was different. Sammy Davis Jr. was supposed to be the guest that night. However, a last-minute health issue forced him to cancel. So Mandel got the call to step in on short notice. And perhaps that pressure, the feeling that he had to make this one count, got to him. Perhaps he thought he needed to go bigger than ever, and that's precisely what he did. He showed up with a giant 12-foot saber-toothed tiger prop, planning to use it in a gag. It was supposed to be a big comedy moment. However, the tiger was massive and quite heavy to move around. Worse, Carson hadn't been told anything about it ahead of time. Unfortunately, after that night, Mandel stopped getting invited. But that's not all. The next one on our list will have you going to bunkers. Wayne Newton.
Implying you were gay?
Yes, he was. And
Did you call him, or?
I called his agents.
Wayne Newton and Johnny Carson are two names that instantly remind you of the golden era of American entertainment. One ruled Las Vegas stages with his voice, while the other dominated late-night television with his razor-sharp wit. On paper, they seemed like kindred spirits, both masters of their craft, who didn't just entertain, but defined what it meant to be a celebrity in their time. So, of course, it made sense when the two struck up a friendship. At least, that's how it started. As time passed, what began as a relationship marked by respect completely unraveled. And by the time this feud was over, they had one confrontation that almost turned into a physical altercation. It sounds unbelievable given how both men were in public, but that's precisely why their falling out still fascinates people to this day. So, what happened? Wayne Newton finally opened up about it years later, during a 2007 interview on Larry King Live. He recalled the early days when he would appear regularly on The Tonight Show, sitting across from Carson, laughing and trading stories, even thinking of the host as a genuine friend. But then, out of nowhere, the jokes began. At first, they were part of Carson's usual monologue routine, from light teasing to little jabs here and there. However, as time passed, they became consistent and meaner. Night after night, Newton found himself the center of Carson's bants. From his appearance to his height, absolutely nothing was off limits. To Newton, however, it felt personal, and he couldn't understand why. He hadn't done anything, at least nothing he knew of, to offend Carson. Yet the jokes didn't stop. Instead, they spread. Other comedians picked up on them, repeating the same cruel punchlines until they became part of Newton's public image. Newton couldn't laugh this one off. He even spent a year and a half trying to reach Carson by calling him, asking mutual contacts to have a conversation, or asking for anything that might explain what had gone wrong. But nothing ever came of it, because Carson never returned the calls, and the mockery just continued. Eventually, Newton had enough. In an interview with the Las Vegas Review-Journal, he admitted how deeply it affected him. "He was very angry with me and started jokes on his show," he said, "and having other comedians join in with those jokes about my lack of manhood, I guess, is the best way to say it. There was no rhyme or reason for it. No truth, in fact, at all. He had been trying this whole time to patch things up, and this time he made a different choice. When he sat across from Larry King that night, he didn't hold back. "I'm going to say something I've never said on television, Mr. King," he began. "Johnny Carson was a mean-spirited human being, and there are people that he has hurt that people will never know about. And for some reason, at some point, he decided to turn that kind of negative attention towards me. And I refused to have it." Shelley Winters. One of the best things about old Hollywood, and honestly showbiz in general, is that the real drama didn't always happen on screen. And sometimes the most unforgettable moments came from what went down live, right in front of an unsuspecting audience. Talk shows, especially, were a goldmine for this kind of tension. And if you know anything about The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, you know it had its fair share of chaos. In 1975, something happened on that stage that still gets people talking nearly 50 years later. It all started with what should have been a fun guest pairing. Shelley Winters, the Oscar-winning American actress, known for speaking her mind, and Oliver Reed, the British actor. Both were on the show together, sitting beside Johnny Carson, but after a while, things went sideways. Now Johnny tossed out a casual question, something like, "Why did Reed think Americans were often intimidated by the British?" Reed, never one to give a boring answer, smirked and said, "Most of them, you see, we have made love to." His reply gravely offended Shelley, who shot back, saying, "I would have remembered." But instead of laughing it off, Reed doubled down and told her she must have just forgotten. You could feel the tension rising, but Shelley wasn't done. A little later, Reed made a slight self-mocking joke about his mustache. In his words, "Proves I'm not terribly virile." Shelley, remembering the altercation they had earlier, replied, "I remembered." From that point on, it was clear Oliver Reed was irritated. Every time Shelley commented, he looked increasingly annoyed. At one point, while he was commenting on how some Americans behaved, he glanced toward her and said, "And some of them are quite loud." Then came the moment that made things worse. He turned to Shelley, right there on air, and shushed her. Then he looked at the audience and asked if he was justified in doing it. Some people clapped, but one person booed, and that was all Reed needed to launch into another jab. "Women's liberation, madam, will never survive, not while I'm in the kitchen." At this point, the energy on stage had shifted completely. But Shelley still tried to keep things light.